Hello, I'm Bella. I was the one who paid the bills while they toasted to her success. At dinner, my father sneered, "You'll never match your sister." My mother laughed and clinked her glass like it was a wedding speech. And my sister? She soaked it all in, with a smile I paid for. They used my money, my silence, my signature, then erased me from family photos, from the will, even from memory. But when I finally said, "Then let her pay the bills?" their faces went pale. And that was just the beginning. What would you do if the people who raised you used you instead? I stepped through the front door just after 6:30 p.m., the kind of tired that seeps into your bones, the kind of tired that comes from standing for 12 hours straight under fluorescent lights, dealing with chaos in scrubs still faintly splattered with someone else's worst day. I didn't even get a chance to shower. My shoes were still sticky from the floor cleaner at the ICU, and my ponytail had loosened, letting curls escape around my neck. The house smelled like lemon-polished wood and rosemary chicken, Mom's signature "company is coming" scent. That alone should have been the red flag. This wasn't an ordinary dinner, but I was too exhausted to think that far ahead. I dropped my keys in the ceramic bowl by the door and quietly slipped my phone into my bag, silencing a patient's family text that read, "Thank you for staying with Mom until the end." Nobody looked up. The dining room was aglow with soft yellow lighting from the overhead chandelier. Vera, my mother, floated between the kitchen and table like some carefully staged host on a reality show, hair curled, pearls out, smile perfectly plastic. Gideon, my father, was already seated, wine glass half full, checking his watch. "Nice of you to join us," he muttered, not even looking up. "Callista's been waiting." I blinked, scanning the table. Floral centerpieces, place cards, wine glasses glistening, plates arranged like a catalog photo. But no place card for me, not a single one. They all had their names in cursive gold foil. Callista, Mom, Dad, Oren, but nothing for me. Not even a folded napkin. I sat down in the seat at the end, the one closest to the kitchen and farthest from the wine. I didn't ask. I didn't comment. I just sat there, my back still aching from lifting a 6-foot-tall, unconscious man onto a stretcher less than 3 hours earlier. Callista was glowing. Her silk blouse, bone white with pearl buttons, caught the light like a soft halo. I'd seen that blouse before, too, online. I'd seen the receipt come through on the credit card she still used, the one under my name. She was talking about her new job title, Director of Brand Engagement, whatever that meant in the world of Instagram filters and overpriced candles. "Congratulations, sweetheart," Vera cooed, gently brushing Callista's hair back like she was 12 again. "Your boss sees what we've known all along." Then came the toast. Gideon stood, lifted his glass, and turned to the table. "Not me, never me." "To my brilliant daughter, Callista," he began, pausing for effect. "Some people are just born to shine." Everyone clinked their glasses. I didn't move. The smile on Callista's face stretched wider. Oren laughed politely. Vera beamed, proud like she'd raised royalty. I swallowed hard, not the wine, just my dignity, and tried to breathe. My throat felt dry, my chest tight. I opened my mouth, testing the waters. "We revived a cardiac arrest patient today," I said softly. "ICU was full, but we managed to stabilize her. My team—" "Oh, Bella," Gideon cut in, shaking his head with a smirk. "You're still at that hospital, right? Look, we know you try hard, but you'll never match your sister. That's just life." Vera laughed and clinked glasses with him. Callista smirked, the kind of smirk that doesn't come from joy, but from superiority. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. But something in me cracked, like a quiet fissure in glass. I reached for my wine glass, finally lifting it, only not to toast. I held it gently, turning it slightly by the stem, then looked straight into Gideon's eyes. "Then let her pay the bills." It took them a second. Vera blinked first. Oren set down his fork. Callista froze. Gideon looked confused. "What?" he asked, voice dipping. I stood up, reached into my bag, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Creased, but pristine. I walked to the head of the table, placed it right in front of Callista, and stepped back. "That's the catering invoice," I said, my voice calm. Wound down $928.45, paid in full by me, like always. They all stared at the paper as if it were written in another language. The flowers? The wine? The crystal place settings? I added, my tone still even. You're welcome. Gideon's mouth opened, but no words came out. I took a slow breath, feeling the heat rising in my cheeks, but not from shame, not anymore. You've been toasting to her success with my money for years, I said, my gaze sweeping the table. So here's a toast of my own. I lifted the glass, tipped it slightly toward Callista, then set it down, untouched. I'll let you toast to that. And with that, I picked up my purse, walked out of the dining room, and left the front door open just long enough to hear the quiet gasp behind me. I didn't slam it. I didn't look back. As I stepped out into the cool night air, a breeze carried the faint scent of rosemary and regret. I walked to my car without a word, without tears, without the need to explain. They could toast all they wanted, but starting that night, they'd be doing it without me. If I wasn't in their picture, maybe I should stop standing in the frame. That thought sat with me like the weight of someone else's jacket, heavy, ill-fitting, and unwelcome. By the time I got back to my apartment that night, the artificial taste of wine still lingered in my mouth, though I'd barely touched my glass. My purse felt heavier than usual. Maybe it was the receipt. Maybe it was just the burden of finally saying something after years of saying nothing. The next morning, I woke before my alarm. Not out of restfulness, just muscle memory. I sat on the edge of my bed, my scrubs from yesterday still hanging on the closet door, stained with both Cabernet and dried iodine. The light outside my window bled through slowly, painting everything in a soft gray. I didn't reach for coffee. I reached for my phone. 3 texts, all from Mom. You embarrassed us last night. That was completely uncalled for. You should apologize to your sister. I stared at the screen for a while. Then I turned it face down on the counter and walked to the bathroom. As I brushed my teeth, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. Tired eyes, lips pressed tight, a faint crease between my brows that had started to settle in lately, like my face had finally caught up with my spirit. I didn't look angry, just finished. The rest of the weekend passed quietly. I picked up extra shifts, filled out discharge paperwork, and held the hand of a woman whose son never made it to say goodbye. That made more sense to me than anything at that dinner table ever did. By midweek, I got a text from Callista asking if she could borrow one of my old anatomy textbooks. She'd left hers at Oren's, which, knowing her, probably meant she'd never opened it. Sure, I replied, already dreading what that meant, stepping foot in that house again. I showed up Thursday afternoon. The driveway was empty, which I appreciated. I rang the doorbell out of habit, even though I still had a key. No one answered, so I let myself in. The house felt colder than usual, not in temperature, just in energy. The hallway smelled like lemon polish, and Vera had lit one of her overpriced lavender candles in the kitchen, like she was expecting someone more pleasant. I walked through the living room slowly, almost cautiously, like the walls had ears. That's when I saw it. The gallery wall, the one that used to have our family milestones, had been rearranged. I paused, staring. The photo of me in my white coat, the one from my nursing school graduation, was gone. In its place was a blown-up canvas print of Callista and Oren on a beach in Hawaii. She was wearing a white wrap dress, barefoot, grinning like a woman who'd never carried the weight of anyone but herself. The wall didn't just look different. It looked corrected, like someone had decided what did and didn't belong. I stood there longer than I meant to, not because I was shocked, but because I wasn't. In the hallway, I spotted a thick manila envelope sitting on a side table. It was marked in Gideon's handwriting, "Will update, for family review." I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. The language was clinical, matter-of-fact. The house would go to Callista, the Tahoe cabin, the cars, even the antique piano my grandmother used to play. All of it. My name didn't appear once, not even in a line that said I'd declined an inheritance. Just nothing. It was like I'd been erased before I was ever there. I put the documents back exactly how I found them, pressed flat, corners aligned. Then I walked to the kitchen. Vera was at the stove when I arrived. She didn't flinch when she saw me, didn't even greet me, just stirred something in a pot like we were two strangers who happened to share a last name. "I saw the new will," I said evenly. She kept stirring. "Did I die recently and no one told me?" She finally looked at me, that tight smile stretching across her face like saran wrap. "Callista is the face of this family," she said softly. "You're stable. You'll be fine." That was the moment I realized she actually believed that was comforting, that being considered fine was some kind of prize, that my stability meant I didn't need acknowledgement or space or legacy. I didn't argue. What was there to say? Instead, I walked down the hall to the office where my textbook sat on the second shelf. I grabbed it, then turned to leave. On my way out, I passed the living room again and glanced once more at the wall. Not a trace of me. No baby pictures, no school portraits, no white coat, only Callista. And it hit me. I was never meant to be part of the picture. I was the one holding the camera, the one fetching the frame, the one paying for the glass. As I reached the front door, my fingers paused on the knob. It wasn't rage that held me there. It was grief. The slow, heavy kind that doesn't shout. The kind that just settles. I opened the door, stepped outside, and let it shut behind me with a soft click. I didn't look back. I was funding the celebration of someone who had deleted me. That realization didn't hit like a thunderclap. It seeped in slowly, like water under a door, until everything inside me felt soaked and heavy. It started that Thursday morning with a text from my bank. "Suspicious transaction. $3,200 at Bridal Elegance Boutique. Please confirm." I rubbed my temples before I even clicked the link. Bridal Elegance. I knew that store. Knew the gold-lettered bags Callista flaunted when she did try-on hauls in her bedroom for her social media audience. She always said the dresses were gifted by sponsors. Apparently, this one was gifted by me. I had forgotten about that emergency credit card. Opened it 5 years ago when the roof started leaking at Mom and Dad's place, and I was afraid they couldn't cover the repairs. I gave Vera access just in case. Apparently, in case now included shopping for custom wedding gowns. I clicked open Callista's story on Instagram. There she was, twirling in a silk mermaid-cut dress in front of 3 friends, each holding champagne. "She said yes to the dress," the caption read, with a heart emoji. I stared at her grinning face and thought, that's what $3,200 looks like when it's smiling and wearing designer shoes. I didn't call her. I didn't text Mom. I opened my laptop. 3 hours and a half a cup of microwaved coffee later, I had spreadsheets. My online banking history was a paper trail of betrayal. There were monthly payments labeled mortgage support that I'd been sending automatically, $2,300 a month, every month, for the last 22 months. I'd set them up when Gideon mentioned the house might go under, back when COVID first hit. Except, I remembered the refinance. The mortgage had been paid off 3 years ago. I opened the PDF I'd scanned of the property documents from that will envelope and confirmed it. No active lien, paid in full. So where the hell was that money going? I dug deeper, cross-referencing deposits into Callista's accounts. One transfer stood out, a tuition payment of $11,480 to the Pacific Online School of Business Management. That was the executive MBA Callista had been bragging about at dinner. She said she'd gotten a scholarship. No, she'd gotten a sister with direct deposit. I closed the laptop, stood up, and walked to the kitchen. I poured water into a glass and drank it too fast, choking slightly. My hands shook, not from anger, but from the slow, burning disbelief that comes from realizing you've been the only one holding up a house. Everyone else thinks just floats. The air in my apartment felt different, too still, too clean. I pulled out a photo frame from under the counter. It was dusty, one I hadn't looked at in a while. My ICU team, standing shoulder to shoulder in our protective gear, masks off for a single breath between chaos. We were exhausted, and we were proud. I picked it up and set it on my bookshelf where it belonged. That afternoon, I decided to take a short walk just to get some air. I scrolled my phone absent-mindedly as I waited for my drink at the corner cafe. That's when I saw it. Callista had posted a throwback photo from our family brunch a few months ago, The one where I had sat next to Vera, where we'd worn pastel shades for Mom's spring rebirth theme. But the picture, I wasn't in it. I remembered exactly where I sat. Between Vera and the window. You could see the exact angle of light coming through in the corner of the image. But my body, my face, my presence, was cropped. She'd cut me out. I enlarged the photo just to be sure. You could still see a sliver of my arm in the edge of the frame, blurred out by a filter. The caption read, "Surround yourself with the people who lift you higher." I stood there in the middle of that cafe, surrounded by strangers, feeling like I had just been shoved off a cliff without anyone noticing. She didn't just forget me. She edited me out, like I was clutter, like I was an inconvenience to the aesthetic she was curating. I didn't cry. There was no point anymore. Tears required the belief that something could be fixed. When I got home, I sat on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by receipts, banking statements, and a burning clarity I hadn't felt in years. They didn't make a mistake. This wasn't negligence. This was orchestration. Mom didn't forget to tell me where the money was going. Callista didn't accidentally crop me out. Gideon didn't mean it another way when he told me I'd never measure up. They meant it. Every dollar, every word, every inch of space on that wall where my photo used to hang. It was all intentional. And the price of my silence? $47,000 and counting. But more than that, my silence had cost me my place in a family I had spent my whole life protecting. I wasn't just invisible. I was disposable. That night, I sat on the couch in silence. No music, no TV, just me and the quiet hum of the refrigerator. And that's when I decided, no more silent contributions. If they wanted to celebrate on someone else's dime, they'd have to find someone else to fund their fantasy. They didn't take me seriously then. That was their first mistake. I'd spent years giving them the benefit of the doubt, telling myself that maybe they didn't mean to be cruel, that maybe their silence and favoritism came from habit, not intention. But that night, watching them all sip champagne while erasing me in real time, I realized something essential. You don't have to scream to be dangerous. You just have to stop funding the lies. 3 weeks after the dinner, I was scheduled for a double shift that ran from Friday night into Saturday afternoon, the kind of back-to-back chaos that leaves your spine aching and your soul quiet. I wrapped up my last patient handoff by 3:20 p.m. and ducked into the locker room to change out of my scrubs. I didn't have time for makeup or a proper outfit, so I threw on a long black skirt and a tan cardigan over a white blouse. Simple. Clean, nothing flashy. The kind of outfit that made you blend into the background, exactly what I didn't want anymore. By the time I arrived at the rooftop venue downtown, the sun was already sliding behind the skyline. Sacramento's early fall air had a dry bite to it, and the rooftop was lit with strands of Edison bulbs and a soft jazz band tucked into one corner. Callista's engagement party was the event of the month, at least according to her. She'd posted about it nonstop for days, catered by some overpriced vegan bistro, floral arrangements imported from Napa, a custom cocktail menu named after her and Oren's love story. I walked in holding the gift I had planned to give months ago, back when I thought she was still just my sister, not a parasite in stilettos. The first thing that happened when I stepped onto the rooftop? A woman in a tight red dress leaned toward me with a smile and said, "Excuse me, can we get a few more napkins over here?" I stared at her, blinking once. Oh, she added quickly. I thought, never mind. Before I could say a word, Callista caught my eye from across the space. She saw what had just happened and smiled, a slow, cruel curl of the lips, like this was all some game she was winning. She didn't correct the woman. She didn't even wave me over. I placed the gift at the designated table and quietly found a seat near the edge of the crowd, my hands clenched around the thin stem of a glass of water. I had told myself I wouldn't stay long, but something in me wanted to see it through, to know for certain how far they were willing to go to keep me invisible. The speeches started an hour in. Gideon went first, of course. His voice boomed like a politician as he praised his firstborn for her leadership, her vision, her bright, unstoppable future. Next came Vera. Our Callista has always been a natural light, she said, voice buttery with pride. She's everything a daughter should be. driven, compassionate, accomplished. And we couldn't be prouder. I watched the clapping hands, the beaming smiles. No one seemed to notice I was the only one not in any photos on the slideshow behind them. That slideshow. It wasn't the one I made. I'd spent 5 nights after work piecing together a heartfelt tribute, video clips, childhood photos, moments of real tenderness between us. I emailed it to Vera days ago, along with a note saying, "This might be the one thing I can still offer her." Instead, they played some slapped-together mess of filtered selfies and glam shots, set to a generic instrumental loop. I didn't even see one image from our childhood. I leaned toward Vera during a lull and asked, "What happened to the video I sent?" She smiled without looking at me. "Yours was a bit too clinical, darling. Hers had better lighting." Better lighting. That was the excuse, as if effort, memory, and love could be dimmed by a warm filter. When Callista took the mic, I expected more of the same. But what I didn't expect was to be publicly rewritten. "Our brilliant Callista," Vera said with a flourish. "And her father, Gideon. And this is Bella. She's a preschool teacher?" The crowd clapped politely. I sat frozen. Preschool teacher. I'd been a critical care nurse for nearly a decade. I'd held people's hearts, literally, in my hands. I'd resuscitated the dying. I'd spent nights walking patients back from the edge when their families had already given up. Preschool teacher. It wasn't even close. I felt the heat rise in my ears, but I didn't storm out. I waited. I listened to every word of Callista's self-congratulating speech, watched her sip from her signature cocktail, the Cali Cooler, as though she hadn't just erased me from my own profession. After the speeches, while people moved to the dessert table, I walked straight to Vera and Callista. My voice was low, but firm. "If you ever do that again," I said, looking directly at Vera, "I won't just correct you in private." Vera looked amused. "Don't be so sensitive, Bella. It's a party." Callista sipped her drink and added, "It was just a little mix-up. Everyone knows you're something medical." I took a deep breath. "And if you're wondering why the catering check bounced," I said, "maybe check your Venmo history." That got their attention. Callista blinked. Vera's smile faltered. I wasn't yelling, I wasn't dramatic, I was just done. They thought I'd stay silent forever, that I'd keep paying for their spotlight while standing in the dark. But not anymore. So that's what I did. I called my lawyer, not out of spite, not out of vengeance, but because for the first time in my life, I was done hoping they'd eventually do right by me. I was finished giving them the benefit of the doubt while they kept stripping me down to nothing but a bank account with legs. It had been a long week. Back-to-back shifts at the hospital had left me with just enough energy to microwave a burrito and scroll through bank statements. On Thursday night, as rain ticked against my apartment windows like a soft metronome, I decided to tackle my taxes. I thought it might help me sleep. I pulled out a shoebox of receipts, most of them worn thin from time and frustration. At the bottom, beneath a stack of medical expense summaries, I found an old spiral notebook, one that used to belong to my grandmother. Her name was barely legible on the inside cover, written in that looping script that made everything look like a love letter. Tucked between 2 pages was a yellowing envelope with my name on it. I recognized her handwriting immediately. Inside was a note, short, soft, powerful. "This savings account is yours, Bella. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. Use it when you need it. I know how strong you are, but you shouldn't always have to be." There was a bank account number at the bottom and a balance circled in ink, $16,000. The only problem, that account was empty now. I logged into the bank website, entered the old account details, and saw it right there, closed last year, all funds transferred, to an account under Vera Taylor. It wasn't even subtle. That account had been my grandmother's final gesture, and they had taken it, quietly, like they were entitled to every part of me, even the love meant only for me. The air in my apartment felt heavier. I left the receipts where they were and walked into the kitchen, grabbing a glass of water. I stood by the sink for a while, not drinking, just breathing, letting the realization settle. I had no more illusions left to shatter. The next morning, I received a letter from a collections agency. At first, I thought it was a mistake. $28,000 owed. Balance due. Account holder, Callista Taylor. Cosigner, Bella Taylor. I sat down slowly, rereading the paper. My stomach flipped. I never signed a loan with Callista. I pulled out my phone and called the agency directly, trying to remain calm. "I'm looking at a collections letter tied to my name," I said. "I need to see the original signed document." They emailed it within 20 minutes, and there it was, my signature. Only, it wasn't. It looked like mine, almost perfect. But there was one thing off. The loop in the B was too wide. I hadn't signed it, but someone who knew how I signed things had forged it. They didn't just steal my savings, they forged my identity. For a graduate degree, Callista didn't even need. Something inside me snapped, not loudly but deeply, like a rope finally severed from tension too long ignored. I didn't cry. I opened a new document on my computer and started listing everything, every payment, every transaction, every document, every time they'd taken from me without asking. Later that night, I was brushing my teeth when my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a group text. From Vera. Me, Gideon, and Callista were all included. Her message read, "Just let her keep thinking she's helping. As long as the money shows up, she won't ask." There it was. One sentence. One damn sentence. Meant for Callista. Sent to all of us by mistake. I stared at the message for 10 seconds, took a screenshot, saved it to a hidden folder. Then I turned off my phone and finished brushing my teeth. No reply. No reaction. I didn't need to rage. They'd written their confession for me. On Sunday morning, I texted Alara, my coworker and the closest thing I had to a sister. "Can you meet for coffee?" We met at our usual diner, a small place tucked between a dry cleaner and a pharmacy. I ordered tea. She didn't speak at first, just waited. Then I laid it all out. The will, the forged loan, the stolen savings, the text message. Alara's eyes didn't widen. She didn't gasp. She just leaned back in the booth and said, "You need to stop thinking of them as family." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "You keep trying to solve a moral problem with emotional logic. But this isn't emotional anymore. This is legal. You need to start treating them like a liability." She stirred her coffee. "You're not their daughter. You're their funding source. And you're the only one not charging interest." I exhaled slowly. She was right. I'd been trying to play chess with people who were flipping the board every time they didn't get their way. That afternoon, I called Sullivan, the same lawyer who helped me handle a malpractice case for a colleague last year. He was efficient, private, brutally honest. I told him everything. He didn't flinch. "I've seen worse," he said. "But this isn't small, Bella. This is coordinated, and it's been going on for years." He asked me to send him every document, every transfer, every email. I did. Then I said the words I never thought I'd say about my own parents, my own sister. I want to protect myself, legally, financially, permanently. He didn't ask why. He just said, "Let's get started." Sullivan's message flashed on my screen like a final warning shot before a war. "Ready to initiate formal financial record request. Want to move forward?" I typed yes and hit send with a steadiness I hadn't felt in years. It had been 3 days since our call. 3 days of collecting statements, screenshots, old emails, and fragments of conversations I had buried under layers of self-denial. Now it was all coming together like a legal mosaic, cold, undeniable, documented. That Thursday evening, I arrived at a networking event hosted by Callista's firm. It was being held at a boutique hotel downtown, the same kind of place that took pride in valet service and personalized cocktails. I had RSVP'd weeks earlier, back when we were still pretending to be family. I decided to show up anyway. I wasn't in scrubs this time. Black slacks, a structured blouse, and a blazer that hadn't seen daylight since my last conference. I wore my hair pulled back, simple stud earrings, and just enough mascara to fake rest. I walked through the lobby, past a decorative fireplace and a group of 20-somethings laughing into their phones. The event space was lined with high-top tables and marketing banners that looked like they'd been designed by someone who Googled minimalist tech chic and went wild. Callista was holding court near the bar, surrounded by 2 interns and an older man I assumed was a client. Her laugh, too loud, too rehearsed, echoed off the glass walls. I didn't make a scene. I didn't interrupt. I waited. She eventually turned and saw me. "Bella," she said, with a practiced grin. "Didn't expect to see you here." "I wasn't sure if I'd make it," I replied, stepping closer. "But I figured I should support the founder of Heartline." Her expression twitched for just a second. "It's just a name." "No," I said calmly. "It was the title of my capstone project in 2015, the same year you asked to borrow my laptop." She sipped her drink. "You're being dramatic." "No, I'm being accurate." There was a pause, then a fake chuckle from one of the interns. Callista shrugged. "Relax, it's not like anyone owns a word." "True," I nodded. "But fraud? That's a little harder to shrug off." Before she could ask what I meant, I turned and walked toward Oren. He was standing alone near the water dispenser, checking his phone. I handed him a manila folder. "What's this?" he asked. "This, financial records, payment logs. That tuition Callista claimed was paid for by her scholarship? It came from a joint account in your name, drawn from a credit line forged under mine." He looked up sharply. "Are you serious?" "Yes," I said. "And I'm telling you because you're involved, whether you know it or not. I'm protecting myself now. If this goes legal, you need to be clear on where your money's been going." He flipped open the folder. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I used to think I owed all of you my silence. I don't anymore." He didn't say thank you, but his jaw tightened, and his hand gripped the folder like it held a bomb. When I left the event an hour later, I wasn't sure if I felt relieved or hollow. Maybe both. The next morning, I woke up to a familiar passive-aggressive circus. Callista had posted a quote online. "Some people are only happy when they're hurting others." The caption was vague enough to look harmless. But I knew exactly who it was for. An hour later, Vera messaged me directly. "You've made your sister cry. Are you proud of yourself?" I stared at the message for a minute, then replied with one sentence. "I haven't even started." That same day, I filed the paperwork with Sullivan to begin the financial discovery process. He confirmed receipt within the hour. While the legal gears began to turn, I continued living like nothing had changed on the outside, but inside, everything had. I moved with intention now. I checked my accounts weekly. I set alerts on every card. I told my landlord not to accept calls from anyone claiming to be a family member handling her affairs. At work, I was still the calm, reliable nurse. I still stayed late when someone needed help, still brought cookies to the break room on Fridays. But something had shifted. Even Jennifer, our charge nurse, noticed. "You seem different lately," she said one afternoon as we restocked gloves together. "I stopped mistaking sacrifice for loyalty," I told her. She didn't ask for details. She just nodded. By Saturday morning, I had a formal copy of Callista's business filing. Heartline LLC. Registered 2 years ago. Trademark pending. Business model? Patient-centered healthcare branding. It was my pitch, word for word, the one I wrote during my final semester in grad school. She hadn't just used my name, she had tried to build an empire on it. I forwarded the paperwork to Sullivan, along with a scanned version of my capstone and a time-stamped email I'd sent to a former professor outlining the idea. He replied within 20 minutes, "We have grounds." That night, I ordered takeout and sat on my couch with the TV off. My phone buzzed again, this time from an unknown number. "Leave her alone, you're being spiteful." No name, but I knew the rhythm, the tone. It was Gideon. I blocked the number. Then, I opened a new document on my laptop and started typing my own timeline. I was done letting them write the narrative. She stole my name. I'm about to make sure she can't use mine ever again. The day of the dinner arrived with a calm I couldn't quite explain. There was no panic, no rehearsed confrontation in my head, just the quiet knowledge that everything I needed to say was printed, dated, and tucked into the folder inside my purse. I'd received the invitation a week earlier. Vera phrased it like a peace offering. "Let's put everything on the table," she wrote in a group text. Family means forgiveness. Family meant different things to different people. To me, it now meant preparing legal backup before sitting down to share a meal. I arrived at the Folsom house right at 6:30 p.m., as requested. The exterior looked the same: white pillars, meticulously trimmed hedges, a wreath on the door that read "Gratitude" in cursive metal. But the atmosphere inside felt staged, like I'd walked into a dinner theater where everyone already knew their lines. Vera greeted me with a tight smile and a soft, "You look well." Callista stood in the dining room, beaming beneath a chandelier, in a deep green cocktail dress. Gideon poured wine like a sommelier on cruise control. The table was set with the good china. There were place cards again. This time, mine read, "Bella," in all caps, printed plainly as if to say, "See? We remembered you this time." We went through the usual motions: salad, small talk, Vera commenting on how dry the air had gotten this season. But there was an undercurrent, a pacing, like they were all waiting for something. And then Gideon started. "We can't keep letting emotions rule decisions," he said, his voice firm. "This is family." I said nothing. I cut into my roasted chicken and chewed slowly. Callista cleared her throat dramatically. "We wanted to bring everyone together," she said, "because it's been a tough few weeks. Misunderstandings, tensions. I get it." She paused for effect. "But I also have some news. I've been selected to receive the Western Marketing Innovator Award next month." Vera gasped softly and clapped. Gideon's chest puffed with pride. Callista held up a glass plaque from under the tablecloth like it was an Oscar. "It's a huge honor," she said, and they specifically cited the Heartline pitch deck in the nomination summary. The award shimmered under the lights. I recognized the formatting, the typography, the sequence of statistics, because I had made that deck. Back in 2019. For her, as a favor, I didn't react right away. I took another bite, let the moment breathe. Gideon leaned back and said, "Bella, some people just aren't built for the spotlight. That's okay." I set my fork down gently, wiped my lips with my napkin, placed it beside my plate, then I reached into my purse and pulled out the folder. There was a slow hush around the table. Vera's hand paused mid-reach for her wine. Callista tilted her head slightly, confused. I opened the folder and began laying out the documents. One by one. Bank statements. Payment transfers. Credit card charges for tuition. The forged loan application. The original capstone file with timestamp metadata. A notarized letter from my former professor confirming authorship. The room fell into a silence so dense you could have heard the shift in their breathing. I looked directly at Callista and said, "Since I'm not built for the spotlight, maybe you should pay your own bills." She blinked. And slowly, her fingers dropped the award onto the table with a soft thud. Vera looked at Gideon. Gideon looked at me. I looked at all of them. "You used my work, my name, my money, and then had the audacity to crop me out of every version of this family. You made me invisible while cashing every check with my signature on it." Callista opened her mouth, but I raised my hand. "Don't," I said. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here to end it." I turned to Vera, who had gone pale. "I found Grandma's letter," I said. "The one she wrote to me, the account she set aside for me, before you closed it and moved the funds." Her lips parted, but I didn't give her room to speak. "To be clear," I continued, "this isn't a confrontation. It's a declaration. The support stops, the silence ends, and the record will reflect the truth." Gideon shifted in his chair. "You always wanted a legacy," I told him. "Well, you've been living in it. You just never bothered to see it." The folder sat open in the center of the table like a bomb already detonated. There were no raised voices. No one reached across the table, just stunned silence, and three people realizing that the person they'd built their comfort around was finally stepping out from under their expectations. I stood slowly, adjusting the blazer I'd worn like armor. "And by the way," I said calmly, "the mortgage payment stops next week." No one moved. I walked out of that dining room with my heels clicking softly against the tile, each step lighter than the last. I shut the door behind me after the dinner and didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew what was coming, and it wasn't another round of guilt-tripping text messages or cold silence. It was collapse, the kind that didn't shake walls or rattle dishes, The kind that happened quietly, in bank accounts, in email chains, in phone calls where voices cracked under pressure they were no longer protected from. By Tuesday morning, 4 days after I told them the mortgage payment was ending, I had 17 missed calls, 1 from the bank, 4 from Gideon, 6 from Vera, and the rest? All from a blocked number I was sure belonged to Callista. I rolled over in bed and stared at the phone for a long minute before flipping it face down. The sunlight creeping through my curtains didn't feel warm. It felt like something intrusive, exposing everything that was once hidden. I sat up, reached for my coffee mug from the night before, and took a sip. It was cold, but I didn't care. When I finally listened to the voicemails, I started with the most recent. "You can't just do this, Bella," Vera's voice cracked through the speaker. "This is your family. We're not strangers." No, they weren't strangers. Strangers don't lie to you with your own handwriting. Strangers don't make you disappear from pictures, from documents, from memory. And still, hearing the panic in her voice didn't bring me any satisfaction, just a quiet sense of inevitability. Like watching a structure you knew wasn't built to last finally crumble under its own weight. I got dressed slowly and headed into work for my afternoon shift at the hospital. Between patients, I stepped into the staff break room for a 5-minute breather. That's when my phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Oren. I confronted her. She admitted it. The loans, the credit, the deck, all of it. Then another message followed, seconds later. I filed. I can't live with someone who sees people as tools. I didn't reply right away. I didn't need to. But my hands shook just a little when I placed the phone back in my locker. By the end of the week, things were unraveling faster than even I expected. Callista's company reached out through Sullivan, formally. They were conducting a review of the Western Marketing Innovator Award she had received. Apparently, someone submitted a tip. They wanted to know who really created the pitch deck. I didn't ask who tipped them off. That Friday afternoon, I walked home from the grocery store, my canvas bag cutting slightly into my shoulder. As I passed a neighbor's house 2 blocks down from the tailor's, I overheard a conversation between 2 women standing by a mailbox. "Looks like the Taylors are losing their house," one said. "Shame, used to be so perfect." I kept walking, didn't flinch, didn't slow down. But later that evening, I did walk past my parents' house. The porch lights were off, the shades were drawn. A large "for sale" sign had been hammered into the lawn, slightly tilted. It didn't look like the house I grew up in. It looked like a shell of a story they tried to sell the world and could no longer afford to maintain. I stood across the street for a while, letting the image settle. I wasn't gloating. I didn't take a picture. I didn't call Alara or send Oren a text. I just let myself feel it. Not victory, not revenge, just the stillness that comes after a long, painful noise finally ends. The following Monday, Sullivan sent me the final legal packet. A stack of papers, neatly collated and enclosed in a heavy envelope with my name on it. Inside was confirmation that all financial responsibilities previously tied to the Taylor household, mortgage, joint credit lines, co-signed student loans, had been dissolved, dismissed, or reassigned to their original applicants. Included was a financial summary that read, "Total personal contribution from Bella Taylor to the Taylor household, 2017-2023, $47,500. Amount legally recoverable? None." They had covered their tracks well, but the final page? It was the one I read twice. "Your name is no longer legally, financially, or contractually connected to Vera Taylor, Gideon Taylor, or Callista Taylor." It didn't feel like cutting a cord. It felt like removing a thread that had been strangling me for years. I signed the document and dropped it off at Sullivan's office on my lunch break. He met me in the lobby with a small nod. "You good?" he asked. I nodded. "I'm clean." The next morning, I received a final message from Vera. "Everything's falling apart. I hope you're happy." I didn't respond, because I wasn't happy. I was free. But being free didn't mean I wasn't still hurt. The first night in my new apartment, I didn't unpack much. Just the essentials: 2 coffee mugs, my bathroom kit, a single set of cotton sheets folded into hospital corners over a mattress I'd finally bought for myself. The place was still mostly hollow, echoing in the way only newly claimed spaces can. But the silence didn't ache. It waited. Not the biting, isolating kind of silence I'd lived with for years, where every creak in the floorboard was a cue for caution. This silence was patient, open, the kind you sit in willingly, the kind that invites you to take a full breath for the first time in ages and not apologize for it. I'd moved to Davis quietly, without ceremony. No send-off, no farewell dinner, no group text explaining the logistics. I didn't know anyone that, not anymore. No one helped me carry boxes. No one asked for my forwarding address. And for the first time in my life, I didn't tell anyone where I was going. It felt like a secret I was finally allowed to keep for myself. The first few days passed gently. I fell into a rhythm that was all my own. The apartment had large windows that welcomed sunlight like an old friend in the mornings and cast a soft, muted gray across the walls in the afternoons. I left most of the walls bare, no holiday wreaths, no twinkle lights, just the essentials, and that felt like enough. The only sounds were the gentle hum of the heater and the occasional bird calling out from the tree just beyond my window. It was peaceful, intentional, real. A few days in, I tackled the last of the moving bins. I worked slowly, folding dish towels, placing books on the shelves one by one. When I reached the box labeled miscellaneous, handle later, my breath caught. Inside, buried between old notebooks and a long-forgotten pair of gloves, was the frame. It had gathered a thin coat of dust, the kind that softens edges. I wiped it clean with the sleeve of my sweater. The photo inside remained untouched. Me, about 6 years old, sitting beside Grandma on the back porch. We were laughing at something off camera, my smile gap-toothed and wide, her silver hair catching the sunlight like a halo. I stared at it longer than I meant to. I hadn't seen that version of myself in a long time, not just in photographs, but in mirrors. I'd forgotten how much brightness once came naturally to me, how much of it had dimmed under the weight of being needed and never chosen. Next to the frame, carefully folded, was the letter she'd written, the one I had found weeks ago, the one Vera had hidden. I unfolded it again, not because I needed the reminder, but because I needed the sound of her voice in my mind. The way she wrote felt like being wrapped in warmth, no demands, no obligations, just love, just belief. I placed the letter and the photo together on the center shelf of my new bookcase, not tucked away, not hidden, visible. Beside them, I added one more thing, my diploma. For years, it had lived in the back of a drawer, unframed, uncelebrated. In the house I grew up in, it was Callista's degrees and awards that earned wall space. Mine were filed away, mentioned politely but never displayed. But here, in this apartment, it mattered. I slid the parchment into a clean black frame I'd picked up from the craft store. No gold trim, no spotlight, just substance, just proof. I set it beside Grandma's photo, not to boast, but to acknowledge what I'd earned. Quietly, on my own. That evening, as I folded a basket of laundry, my phone buzzed with a message from Oren. She moved out. I kept the dog. Thanks for telling the truth. I smiled. Not because I was happy she'd left him, but because someone had finally chosen themselves, drawn a boundary, and honored it. A few minutes later, an email arrived. The sender's name didn't ring a bell at first. Then I realized it was a neighbor from the old neighborhood. Bella, the message began. I don't mean to pry, but I heard you were the one who paid the mortgage for all those years. I always wondered how they kept that house. You deserve peace. It was the kind of validation that asks for nothing. Anonymous. Unsolicited. True, I didn't respond, but I kept the email. Later that week, another envelope arrived, handwritten and delivered through Sullivan's office. Vera's handwriting was unmistakable. Inside, no apology, no remorse, just a page and a half of excuses, a vague reference to how hard things had been for everyone. I read it once, then folded it neatly and slid it into a folder I'd labeled unnecessary, because I didn't need her closure anymore, not the kind that only comes when someone fears they've lost their last thread of control. The next morning, I walked to the clinic where I'd recently started working. It was small, quiet, a family practice tucked into a beige stucco building that didn't try to impress anyone. It served mostly elderly patients and lower-income families, people who didn't want to be impressed, they just wanted to be seen. By mid-morning, I was restocking a supply cart when a woman approached me in the hallway. "You're Bella, right?" she asked. "Yes." She reached for my hands, holding them with surprising strength. Her eyes shimmered. "You saved my mother's life last week. She was scared. And you just stayed. You didn't rush. You listened." "Thank you." I nodded. Not because I didn't have words, but because the moment was already complete. It didn't need more. That night, I brewed a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table, the one that looked out onto the tiny back patio where herbs now grew in old ceramic pots. I opened my journal and wrote, "I used to want them to say those words. Now, I just need to believe them myself." The healing hadn't wrapped itself into a neat little bow. There were still nights when I stared at my phone, half expecting a message I knew better than to hope for. I still missed the idea of family, the imagined version I created in my head, even if the reality had never matched. But something had shifted. Quietly, deeply. I no longer needed to be included in their photos. I didn't need to be rewritten into their stories, because I was writing my own now. Not to prove I belonged in someone else's frame, but to become someone I could no longer ignore. Someone real, someone whole. Sometimes, the hardest thing isn't standing up to strangers, it's walking away from the people who were supposed to protect you. Bella's story reminds us that silence isn't strength when it's used against you. What would you do if the ones you loved the most were also the ones who took you for granted the longest? If this story hit home, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life revenge stories that reveal what family loyalty sometimes costs.